Watching. The street lamp flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow across the pavement, its light pooling in uneven patches like spilled oil. Beneath it she stood, oblivious to the eyes that followed her. Her name was Eleanor, though he didn't know that yet. Not officially. He'd heard it once in passing when her friend called out to her at the cafe 3 weeks ago. Eleanor. It was a name that rolled off the tongue like a half-forgotten lullaby, soft and lilting, yet heavy with something he couldn't place. He liked it. He liked her. From his vantage point across the street, hidden in the shadowed mouth of an alley, he watched her adjust the strap of her canvas bag, the one she carried every Tuesday evening after her shift at the bookstore. The bag was forest green, frayed at the edges, with a small enamel badge shaped like a fox pinned near the zipper. He'd noticed it the first time he saw her, 3 months ago, when the autumn air was still crisp and the leaves hadn't yet turned to rot. The fox intrigued him. Did it mean something to her? A childhood memory, perhaps, a gift from someone she loved? He didn't know, but he wanted to. He wanted to know everything. Eleanor's routine was a clockwork symphony, each movement precise, predictable, yet endlessly fascinating. She left the bookstore at 7:03 p.m., always a minute late because she lingered to straighten the shelves or chat with a co-worker. She'd walk 2 blocks to the corner market, where she'd buy a single bottle of iced tea, lemon, never peach, and a pack of gum, spearmint, always spearmint. Then she'd cross the street, her boots clicking softly against the asphalt, and pause under that flickering street lamp to check her phone, every Tuesday, without fail. Tonight was no different. He leaned against the damp brick wall, his breath shallow, careful not to let the faint cloud of vapour give him away in the October chill. His coat blended with the darkness, a nondescript grey that made him invisible to anyone who was not looking too closely, and no one ever did. People don't notice shadows. They don't notice the absence of light. They notice her, though, her auburn hair catching the street lamp's glow, her quick, nervous smile as she typed a message on her phone. He wondered who she was texting. A friend? A lover? The thought made his fingers twitch, curling into fists inside his pockets. He'd first seen her in July, on a day so hot the air shimmered above the pavement. She'd been sitting outside the cafe, her legs crossed, a book open on the table in front of her. The Bell Jar. He'd noted the title, later buying a copy for himself, though he hadn't read it yet. It sat on his shelf, a relic of her, its pages still crisp and unturned. That day, she'd worn a yellow sundress, the kind that seemed too delicate for the city's grime, and she'd laughed at something her friend said, her head tilting back, exposing the pale curve of her throat. He'd felt it then, that pull, like a hook lodged deep in his chest. She was different. Not like the others who passed through his gaze, fleeting and unforgettable. Eleanor was a puzzle, a mosaic of details he was determined to piece together. He knew so much already. Her Tuesday shifts at the bookstore, her Saturday mornings at the park, where she'd sit on a bench near the fountain, sketching in a leather-bound notebook. She was not an artist, not professionally, but her pencil moved with purpose, capturing the world in sharp, deliberate lines. He'd seen her sketches once, when she'd left the notebook open on the bench while she bought a coffee from the nearby cart. They were good, better than good. Scenes of the city, of strangers' faces, of the fountain spray catching the light. He wondered if she'd ever drawn him. The thought thrilled him, a shiver of possibility that made his pulse quicken. He knew her habits, her rhythms. She listened to music on her walks home, earbuds tucked beneath her hair, and she always chose the same playlist. He could tell by the way her steps marched a faint upbeat tempo. She drank her coffee black, no sugar, and she always tipped the barista, even when her wallet was thin. He'd seen her count out coins once, her brow furrowed, as she calculated what she could spare. She was kind, but not naive. Careful, but not paranoid. She lived alone in a second-floor apartment with a fire escape that overlooked a narrow alley. He'd stood there once, just once, late at night, watching the warm glow of her window. He had not meant to stay long, just long enough to see her silhouette pass by, to know she was safe. Safe. That was what he told himself. He was keeping her safe. The city was full of dangers, men who didn't notice the way she moved, who didn't care about the foxpin or the spearmint gum or the way her laughter sounded like a melody. Men who didn't see her, but he did. He saw everything. Tonight she'd lingered longer under the street lamp, her thumbs moving quickly over her phone. A frown crossed her forehead, and he felt a pang of unease. Something was wrong. He could tell by the way her shoulders tensed, the way her lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted to step closer, to cross the street and ask her what was troubling her, but he stayed rooted in the shadows. He could not break the barrier between them, not yet, not until he knew her completely. She slipped her phone into her bag and started walking again, her pace quicker now, her head lowered against the wind. He followed, keeping his distance, his steps silent on the damp pavement. The city was alive around them, a cacophony of car horns and distant sirens, but to him it was just noise. She was the signal, the only thing that mattered. He noted the way her scarf, a deep burgundy, knitted, probably handmade, slipped slightly, revealing the nape of her neck. He wondered if it was soft, if it smelled of the lavender perfume she sometimes wore. He'd caught the scent once, standing too close in the bookstore, pretending to browse the poetry section while she restocked the shelves. He'd been careful, always careful. He didn't follow too closely, didn't linger too long. He varied his routes, his times, his clothing. Sometimes he wore a baseball cap, sometimes a scarf pulled high. He was a ghost, a flicker at the edge of her world. She never saw him, not really. Once their eyes had met, briefly, in the reflection of a shop window. Her gaze had slid past him, uninterested, and he'd felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. He didn't want her to see him, not yet, but he wanted her to know he was there, to feel his presence like a whisper against her skin. Her apartment building loomed ahead, a squat brick structure with peeling paint and a rusted fire escape. He stopped at the corner, half hidden behind a parked van, and watched as she climbed the steps to the entrance. Her key turned in the lock with a faint click, and then she was gone, swallowed by the building's dim interior. He waited, counting the seconds, until her window lit up, a soft amber glow against the night. There she was, moving behind the curtains, her silhouette graceful and unhurried. He imagined her kicking off her boots, setting her bag on the kitchen counter, maybe pouring a glass of water. He knew her routines, but he didn't know her thoughts. Not yet. He turned away and slipped back into the alley. The city pressed in around him, cold and indifferent, but he felt alive, electric. She was his secret, his purpose. He'd go home and write it all down, the way she'd frowned at her phone, the new scarf, the quickness of her steps. His notebook was nearly full now, pages crowded with details, a map of her life drawn in ink. He'd started it the day after he first saw her, a way to keep her close when she was out of sight. Each entry was a thread weaving her world into his, binding her to him. Days turned to weeks, and his observations grew sharper, more intimate. He noticed the way her hair fell differently when she was tired, the way her fingers tapped a rhythm against her thigh when she was nervous. He learned her favourite coffee shop, her preferred seat by the window, the way she always ordered a second cup if she was meeting someone. He saw her cry once, alone in the park, her face buried in her hands as the fountain burbled nearby. He'd wanted to go to her then, to offer comfort, but he'd stayed hidden, his chest tight with the weight of her sorrow. He didn't know what had made her cry, but he wrote it down, the date and time, the way her shoulders shook, the way she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. He began to see patterns, connections. The day she wore her hair up, she seemed more confident, her steps bolder. The day she wore it down, she was quieter, more introspective. He wondered if she knew how much she revealed in these small choices, how much of herself she gave away to someone who was watching. He wondered if she'd ever sense him, if she'd ever feel the weight of his gaze. Sometimes he thought she might. There were moments, brief, fleeting, when she'd pause, her head turning slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. In those moments he held his breath, certain she'd seen him, certain she'd know. But she never did. Winter came and the city grew colder, sharper. The street lamp still flickered, but now it was joined by strings of Christmas lights strung across the storefronts, their colours bleeding into the snow. Eleanor's routine shifted slightly. She stayed later at the bookstore, her shifts extended for the holiday rush. He adjusted too, lingering longer in the cold, his fingers numb but his eyes never leaving her. He noticed new details. A silver ring on her left hand. A gift, perhaps, or a whim. A new coat, navy blue, with a hood she rarely used. A habit of humming softly to herself when she thought no one was listening. He collected these fragments, hoarding them like treasures, each one a piece of her he could hold. One night, something changed. She did not stop under the street lamp. She did not check her phone. Instead, she walked straight to her apartment, her head down, her steps hurried. He followed, a sense of wrongness creeping into his bones. At her building, she fumbled with her keys, dropping them once, her hands shaking. He wanted to call out, to help her, but he stayed silent, hidden. When she finally disappeared inside, her window did not light up. The curtains remained dark, lifeless. He waited, longer than usual, his breath clouding the air. An hour passed, then two, still nothing. The unease grew, a gnawing thing that clawed at his chest. Had something happened? Was she hurt? Sick? He imagined her lying on the floor unconscious, or worse, not alone. The thought was unbearable. He crossed the street, something he'd never done before, and stood beneath her window, staring up at the blank glass. He could climb the fire escape just to check, just to be sure. But that was a line he had not crossed, a boundary he'd promised himself that he would not breach. He turned away, his mind racing. He'd come back tomorrow. He'd watch again more closely. He'd make sure she was safe. The next evening, she was there, under the street lamp, her routine restored. Relief flooded him, but it was tinged with something else. Doubt. She looked different tonight, her movements sharper, her eyes darting to the shadows. Did she know? Had she felt him last night, standing too close, breaking his own rules? He stayed further back, but he could not stop watching. She was still his puzzle, his mosaic, but now there was a crack in the pattern, a question he could not answer. Weeks passed and the crack widened. She stopped sketching in the park. She changed her route home, taking a different street, one he had not mapped. She looked over her shoulder more often, her eyes scanning the darkness. He was careful, so careful, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping away, that the threads that he'd woven were unravelling. One night, under the flickering street lamp, she stopped. She did not check her phone. She did not adjust her bag. Instead, she turned slowly, deliberately, and looked straight at the alley where he stood. Her eyes locked onto the shadows, and for a moment he was certain she saw him. His breath caught, his body frozen. She took a step forward, then another, her gaze unwavering. He did not move, he could not. The air between them felt charged, electric, as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Then she spoke, her voice low, steady, cutting through the night like a blade. "I know you're there." His heart stopped. He wanted to step forward, to explain, to tell her he was keeping her safe, that he saw her in a way no one else did. But he did not. He stayed in the shadows, silent, invisible. She waited, her eyes searching the darkness, and then she turned and walked away, her steps quick, purposeful. He watched her go, his chest tight, his notebook heavy in his pocket. He didn't follow her that night. He couldn't. The next evening he returned to the alley, but she wasn't there. The street lamp flickered, casting its sickly light, but the pavement beneath it was empty. He checked the bookstore, the park, the cafe. Nothing. Her window stayed dark, her apartment silent. Days turned to weeks, and still she was gone. He searched for her, retracing her routes, haunting the places she'd been, but it was as if she'd vanished, a ghost slipping through his fingers. He went back to the alley one last time, standing beneath the street lamp, its light buzzing faintly above him. He opened his notebook, the pages filled with her life, her details, her essence. He tore them out one by one, letting them scatter in the wind, watching as they disappeared into the night. And then he felt it, a prickle at the back of his neck, a weight he couldn't shake. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows. There, at the edge of the alley, something moved, a figure, indistinct, watching him. He squinted, trying to make out its shape, but it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. He stood there, alone, the street lamp flickering above him, and for the first time he wondered if he'd ever been the only one watching.